Here's something you might not have known before now. Wrestling is pretty dangerous. It turns out that a form of entertainment that involves dropping people on their heads, hitting them with chairs and chucking them off the top of ladders actually takes a great deal of skill to pull off. That means whoever's doing said wrestles must be of sound body and mind, otherwise they pose a real danger to themselves and others. This is why the following 10 wrestlers should have never been allowed to carry on or even start a certain wrestling match. Whether they got injured during the bout, before it, or were just in no fit state to be doing anything, these grapplers should have been whisked away to a hospital, local medical facility, before they even set their eyes on a squared circle. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 times a wrestler shouldn't have been allowed to perform. Join us. Number 10, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero and JBL knew that they were up against it in their WWE title headliner at Judgment Day 2004. Bradshaw's transformation from beer-drinking babyface tag team specialist to J.R. Ewing-esque supervillain was sudden, and it's fair to say that not everybody bought him as a credible challenger. The two men certainly attempted to turn up the heat prior to their big showdown with some controversial promos and angles, but the real test would be in front of a sold-out Staples Center and pay-per-view audience. The match was chugging along fine on the night and was decent, if not unexceptional, until JBL blasted Latino Heat with a vicious chair shot to the head and Eddie sprung a gusher. Accidentally cutting an artery while performing the blade job, Guerrero quickly redefined the term Crimson Mask. The sheer amount of plasma shed, and there were puddles of it, clearly caused concern for Eddie's welfare among those in attendance, and it's frankly astonishing that he continued to wrestle for so long as blood poured out of the wound. Weakened by the blood loss, the champ collapsed in the ring and had to be helped backstage, where he promptly went into shock. Rushed off in an ambulance, Eddie was pumped full of fluids and stitched up before being given the week off to recover. I'll say. Number 9, Bret Hart. As he will tell anybody within 20 feet of him at any given time, Bret Hart's in-ring career was ended by a botched thrust kick courtesy of Goldberg in the main event of WCW's Starrcade 99 pay-per-view. It's estimated that Hart suffered up to 3 more concussions during the course of the match, which ended in a screwy finish because WCW. The Hitman should have taken time off to recover after this slew of head injuries, but he's on this list, so you can guess where this story is going. It's going straight into the ring the very next night. Yes, less than 24 hours later, the excellence of execution was main eventing Nitro against none other than Bill Goldberg. The two were battling for the WCW title, which had been declared vacant earlier in the night because of the aforementioned screwy finish. Considering Bret was probably still seeing spots and feeling woozy, it is unforgivable that he was wrestling again against Goldberg of all people, and the match no doubt caused more damage and contributed in some way to his career-ending post-concussion issues. Hart wrestled a further 8 matches, including a hardcore bout with Terry Funk, before finally saying that enough was enough. Number 8, Mr. Perfect. Alongside Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig was one of the very best in-ring workers the WWE had in the early 1990s. The two put on an absolute clinic at the 1991 SummerSlam, with Hart overcoming the Perfect One to secure his first ever IC title. Whilst you wouldn't have been able to tell based on the exceptional quality, Hennig was suffering from severe back pain throughout the contest, which had begun in the weeks leading up to it. His injury was so bad that he couldn't even hit his signature Perfect Plex, though he did save one of those for Bret to kick out of at the pay-per-view. After passing on the title to the Hitman, Perfect took some time off to recover, and by took some time off we mean that he actually temporarily retired. But because retirements in wrestling last as long as Ric Flair marriages, or Ric Flair retirements for that matter, Hennig did eventually return to the ring. However, it is scary to think that a match as excellent as Perfect vs. Hart could have been a key reason why one of the all-time greats had to step away from the ring. Number 7, The Undertaker. Mark Calloway was subjected to all sorts of physical torture across his 3 decades playing The Undertaker, including more unprotected chair shots to the head than you could shake a concussion lawsuit at. Perhaps the strangest injury Taker ever suffered was at the 2010 Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Whilst making his entrance ahead of the World Heavyweight Championship chamber match, the dead man got badly burnt by his own entrance pyro. Undertaker abandoned his usual slow walk to the ring and rushed inside the chamber, where he quickly doused himself with water. The fire had given him first and second degree burns to his neck and chest. He was only saved from further damage thanks to his thick black coat. Told you a goth phase would be useful, mum. Taker was cleared by a ringside doctor, but he then had to stand inside the pod for over half an hour, where he could literally smell his own cooking flesh. They had to have him in there to set up his match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26, yes, but surely there had to be a better way than this. Number 6, Kurt Angle. Despite being an excellent match, the main event of WrestleMania 19 was definitely cursed. This is the infamous Brock Lesnar shooting star press match, where the next big thing damn near killed himself trying to rotate his huge carcass through the air to end the match. However, before the bell had even rung, the other participant in this WWE Championship contest was also seriously banged up. Angle re-injured his famous broken freaking neck in the build-up to his match with Lesnar at No Way Out, with things being bad to the point that he was almost taken off the show and replaced with Chris Benoit. Lesnar and Angle even had a match on a pre-Mania SmackDown for the title, just in case WWE wanted to pull the old switcheroo. However, being the absolute madman he is, Angle fought through the injury and put Lesnar over at the show of shows. He then took 3 months off to have experimental surgery to fix the litany of issues with his neck. Angle vs Lesnar was a worthy WrestleMania main event, but it actually ended up endangering both men's lives, and surely no wrestling match is worth that. Number 5, Kurt Angle. It's a Kurt Angle double whammy, and whammy is the operative word in this entry. Kurt Angle and Triple H were fighting over the affections of Stephanie McMahon in the build-up to SummerSlam 2000, one of the best soap opera storylines WWE has ever done. In the opening melee, the game got Angle up on the announce table for a pedigree. Regrettably, the table broke prematurely, sending the Olympian crashing face-first into the floor and giving him a gold medal-worthy concussion. Angle was rushed to the back, but re-emerged for the match's conclusion. He was visibly out of it upon his return, clearly still suffering the effects of the table spot. Considering the match ended with The Rock pinning Triple H, they could have really just kept Kurt out of the remainder of it. Yes, his inclusion was maybe needed to further the love triangle storyline, but they could have done something on Raw, and anyway, that got dropped not long after because Triple H got jealous. Number 4, Big Van Vader. The late great Big Van Vader's incredible combination of size, power, and agility made him one of the most unique performers to ever grace a wrestling ring. He was like a slasher movie monster, completely relentless in his pursuits. Also, much like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, he could brush off wounds that would have left any normal man dead. During a match in Japan in 1990, Vader suffered an errant thumb to the eye from his opponent Stan Hansen, with stomach-churning results. His left eye popped completely out of its socket, leaving the mastodon looking like he was wearing a pair of comedy glasses. Not fazed by having his entire eye come out of his head, the big man casually popped it back in and held it in place with his eyelid to finish the match. That, dear viewers, is utterly mental, and there is no way that Vader should have been allowed to continue. I mean, do I really need to explain how bad it was that his eye wasn't where it was supposed to be? I'm no doctor, but that sounds like something that needs immediate medical attention. Number 3, Mankind. When it comes to the Mount Rushmore of wrestling bumps, Mick Foley probably has 2 or 3 heads all to himself. And he would also probably jump off said mountain through a flaming table if you let him. His most iconic stunt is, of course, his terrifying fall from the top of Hell in a Cell during his King of the Ring 1998 match with The Undertaker. Mick Foley was sent hurtling off the side of the structure over 20 feet to the ground below. He disintegrated the announce table when he made contact with it, lying in a crumpled heap as millions of fans around the world wondered if he had even survived the fall. We all know what happened next. Mankind somehow carries on the match, takes yet another terrifying bump through the cell, and wrestles a full-on match, including thumbtack spots with Taker before eating a pin. It is iconic, one of the most important wrestling matches of all time, but the toll it took on poor Foley's body is evident to this very day. Number 2, Matt Hardy. Early into their Broken Rules match at AEW's All Out 2020 pay-per-view, Sammy Guevara tackled Matt Hardy off the top of a scissor lift, sending both men crashing through a table. A super dangerous spot, Matt ended up smacking his head on the concrete floor, knocking him totally loopy. I mean, firstly, why wasn't the floor padded? Secondly, why aren't there more tables to break the fall? And thirdly, who actually thought this was a good idea? What followed was not a pretty sight. Hardy stayed down for an uncomfortably long time before Guevara dragged him to his feet to avoid a 10 count. Then Matt stumbled around, clearly not with it, desperately attempting to finish the match. The bell then rang and the fight was called off. Except it wasn't, as Matt was somehow cleared to finish the match, which ended with a stupidly reckless spot where he and Sammy scaled some scaffolding. Hardy should have been kept far away from this match once he suffered his injury, as he was nowhere near fit enough to compete. The fact that AEW's doctors let him carry on remains one of the biggest black marks against the company to this very day. Number 1. Jeff Hardy. TNA Victory Road 2011 was supposed to end with a dream match between heavyweight champion Sting and challenger Jeff Hardy, but that's not how it went down. Instead, Hardy came out to the ring looking like he was on another planet. He hadn't been seen for much of the day leading up to the show, the assumption being that he was off indulging his vices. When the time came to start the match, Eric Bischoff called an audible and had Sting forcibly pin Hardy after just 88 seconds of action, most of which was just Jeff taunting the crowd. The TNA fans chanted that the spectacle was a lot of rubbish, although they did use much spicier language, and Sting replied with, "I agree," which was a damning indictment of what had just happened. This was a sad sight to see, Hardy at his lowest, the absolute worst of his personal issues. That said, the issue should have been dealt with backstage. He definitely should not have gone out in front of a crowd looking and acting the way he did. This was a dark day for Jeff Hardy, a dark day for TNA, and a dark day for pro wrestling as a whole.